Um, Look, we return now to an incredibly sad, but I think incredibly important story that broke around, a week ago, or broke last week. The story of Vanessa V, a 17-year-old who died of starvation in an emergency housing motel away from her parents, who had been alienated by her as she struggled with severe autism, anorexia, and, well, supposedly gender dysphoria. She was embraced and some would say captured by the rainbow community inside her school and inside various social agencies, isolated from her parents, and she died alone of anorexia, of malnutrition. And it was an amazing story published by Ruth Hill, in which she reported that Vanessa's parents, who were heartbroken, of course, were criticised at the scene of her death by police who accused them of misgendering her. A remarkable story that I hope more people read and go back to the original source on, that speaks to so much that is of concern in our society. But the story, no mention of it from Matt King when he launched the suicide prevention policy yesterday. Matt Ducey when he launched the suicide prevention policy yesterday. Nothing from the Prime Minister. Silence. Apart from people like David Farrier, who is a self-described gutter snipe journalist who works out of Los Angeles now, former Television New Zealand journalist, inverted commas, and also, it would seem, anti-religion activist. Mr. Farrier has published in his aptly monikered online blog Webworm a huge critique of Ruth Hill, that is the journalist from RNZ who wrote this shocking story about Vanessa or V, which is highly critical of her grieving parents and suggests the entire story is a work of transgender hatred. It's a pretty shocking piece by David Farrier, highly emotional and highly critical of grieving parents. And I thought, because they are dealing with enough, the best person I could talk to about that piece, that reaction, and the general reaction to this story is someone who's been involved in these issues and indeed I think knows the people concerned. Fern Hickson from Resist Gender Education. Fern joins us by video link now. Fern, good morning to you.
Hi, Sean. Thank you for having me. Could I just start, please, by making a small correction?
Yeah.
You said that Vanessa had severe autism and anorexia. It's the other way around. She had severe anorexia
and autism. Thank you.
She wasn't severely autistic. She was diagnosed with autism, but it was not severe. She was actually excelling at school.
Yeah. Severely autistic.
Severe anorexia.
Yeah. Look, have you talked to her parents since the story came out, Fern? Have you had a chance to talk to them or interact? How are they doing?
Yes. Well, they're devastated, very upset, very hurt, but also very pleased to be able to put out a statement yesterday. And I'd just like to read a little snippet from it.
Absolutely.
This is in response to David Farrier. It said, we believe the publishing and dissemination of our daughter's personal and private material is in very bad taste, unnecessary, lowbrow, unethical, and wholly cruel to the living.
And that he based his, if you like, counterfactual against the Ruth Hill story, and I'm sorry to say it, against Vanessa's parents, and he accused them of misgendering her too, or dead naming her, didn't he? He based that on information he had gathered from a chat room for anorexics.
Yes.
He had trolled through that. Yeah.
That's right. It's really telling that hundreds and hundreds of people have responded to Ruth Hill's story with the correct response, which is shock and outrage. But the trans activists like David Farrier, they're so desperate to protect their beliefs that they've responded by focusing on so-called misgendering and dead naming, and trying their best to turn the blame onto the parents instead of where it actually belongs, which is a lack of appropriate care by the state. So they're more concerned about misgendering and dead naming than the horrifying way in which Vanessa died all alone in a motel room. So the posts that the messages from Vanessa that Farrier quotes are from a pro-Anna chat room, which means pro-anorexia. And so the people in that chat room are all anorexics to one degree or another. And of course, without going into the chat room, you wouldn't know whether any of them are talking any sense or not. But David Farrier has picked out, he's cherry-picked the comments from Vanessa that will shine the worst light
that he
possible
presumes
on
are from
parents.
Vanessa. Yeah.
Yes, and he's also, they're out of context, they're out of chronological order. It's just a really base thing to do.
Did Vanessa's grieving parents find that hateful and upsetting, what he wrote?
Yes, her mother said it made her physically sick.
Wow. Was it published by any mainstream media, his rant on Webboom?
Not that I know of, but
Jolly good job. Well,
I
that's
do
something.
I do know that David Fisher from New Zealand Herald is working on a piece at the moment in which he intends to include some of the excerpts. Or that's what he said 2 days ago when I spoke to him.
Good Lord.
I said I thought it was unethical. To me, it's equivalent to publishing the diary of a teenager after the teenager commits suicide. I don't think any journalist would do that.
Apart from that, Fern, what has the reaction been to this, I think, so important story?
A huge outpouring of sympathy and empathy for the parents, and also disgust that so many professionals could assist Vanessa in alienating herself from her parents. She was very, very unwell. She was so unwell that she was on a compulsory mental health order. And you don't get those unless you're extremely unwell.
Yeah.
So she was very, very unwell. But as soon as she identified as a boy, all of the professionals, the teachers, the counsellors, social workers, housing providers, everybody affirmed her identity. And that allowed her to then alienate herself from her parents. And eventually she chose to leave home. And she went no contact. She didn't contact her parents for 6 months. And then she was back in contact with them again.
It's like she was captured by a cult, Fern.
That's how I describe it.
Yeah. Look, the other amazing thing I found yesterday, Matt Ducey launches a suicide prevention strategy, which sounds like building a new bureaucracy to me. No mention of puberty blockers, the massive changes in similar countries around the world towards government support for transgendering. There's been a revolution. The madness has stopped in most other places. Matt Ducey and this government just refused to address it. And if they did address it, the Vanessa story may never have happened.
That's right. It's well overdue for the government to come to announce its puberty blocker review, and there's also the best practice guidelines which for gender dysphoria, which we're waiting to have published.
Yeah.
But the government contracted to write those best practice guidelines, PATHA. They're
a bunch of transgender lobbyists. Yeah.
Exactly. Yes, they're not independent.
Yeah.
And so, they've contracted them to write them, and now they're in a bit of a bind.
Yeah.